Hello and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andrew Bentley. Now, the Commander's Forge is a spot for me to talk about Commander in the ways that I enjoy it. And this week I had planned on doing a deck tech on Goreclaw, Terror of Kelsizma, my mono-green monsters deck. Because she may not be the Queen of the Bears, but she is the Queen of the Trample. But I got my hands on a box of Commander Legends, and I ended up opening Sengir the Dark Baron. So I decided to build a mono black deck. And I'm calling it the Baron and his Cat. That name comes from running Sengir the Dark Baron and Falthus Shadowcat Familiar. Now, the Baron is 4 black for a 4/4 vampire noble with flying, and whenever another creature dies, put 2+1/+1 counters on Sengir the Dark Baron. And this is what we're going to play mostly into. His next ability is, whenever another player loses the game, you gain life equal to that player's life total as the turn began. I don't know how often that'll come up, but it's there if we need it. And then he has Partner. Now, his partner, Falthus Shadowcat Familiar, is 2 and a black for a 2/2. But it says that commanders you control have Menace and Death Touch. And it also has Partner, because this wouldn't work without that. And I want nothing more than to have Baron Sengir be a ridiculously huge creature with flying, Menace, and Death Touch. Yeah. Now, for this deck tech, what I'm going to do is break the deck down into different categories. In this case, I have 6 categories. They are Throw them out, Bring them back, Those that witness the deed, Finding what I need when I want it, the usual Great Tracts of Land, and Game's Gotta End. And as I go into them, I will explain which each one does and why I named it that. So, starting off with the Throw Them Out, what that is Sacrifice Outlets. And it starts with Ashnod's Altar, which is a 3 generic mana artifact that says sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless to your mana pool. Now, this is a free sack outlet that also helps us net mana, which can lead into some very disgusting loops, which is great. That said, just having a free sacrifice outlet at any time in this deck is going to be great, and that moves me into my next one, Altar of Dementia, which is a 2 generic cost artifact that says sacrifice a creature, target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into the graveyard. This could be used to self-mill a little bit, because we are later on going to talk about ways that I can bring stuff back. And who knows, maybe somebody goes to kill the Baron when he has 30-something counters on him and I just mill him out. Who knows? But still in that vein of free sacrifice outlets, the next one we have is Viscera Seer, which is a single black mana for a 1/1 vampire wizard that says sacrifice a creature, scry 1. Which, in my opinion, is one of the most efficient sacrifice outlets. And the fact that it's a creature means we can also use it to sacrifice to put counters on the Baron. You can actually sacrifice it to itself if we need to. It's just the potential to go crazy with a card like this is astronomical. And it's actually very similar to the next card I'm going to talk about, which is Woe Strider, which is 2 and a black for a 3/2 horror. Now, when he enters, he brings a 0/1 goat creature token with him, which gives you a creature to sacrifice. Then he also says sacrifice another creature, scry 1, which is the same text as Viscera Seer. And he also has Escape. Now, Escape from Theros Beyond Death lets you bring cards back from your graveyard by paying some amount of mana and exiling cards. In this case, you play 3 black and exile 4 other cards from your graveyard, and he escapes. And he also says that he escapes with 2+1/+1 counters on him, which would make him a 5/4. Now, you might think having to exile stuff from our graveyard to bring it back might be detrimental, but I really don't think so. Just by the sheer number of stuff that I'm going to want to be throwing away, I don't think it'll be a problem. Now, the last card in this section that I'm going to talk about is High Market, which is a land that you can either tap to add a colorless, or you can tap it and sacrifice a creature to gain a life. It's not technically free because you still have to tap it to do it, but it's just another source of sacrifice that we want to play. Now, our next category is called Bring 'em Back. And as that sounds like, it's going to talk about some reanimation. And up first, we have Rakshasa Debaser, which is from the new Commander Legends set. And it is a 4 black 6/6 cat demon. And whenever it attacks, you can put target creature card from depending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And it has Encore for 6 black, which means you exile it from your graveyard and you make a token that attacks each opponent. This reanimates enemy creatures, which can be hilarious. And I'm going to look forward to doing this a lot. It's also a decent body with a 6/6, and when it comes back, you get a 6/6 attacking everybody. I've been very impressed mechanically with this card so far. Next, we have Phyrexian Delver, which is an old staple. For 3 black for a 3/2, and it's a zombie. But when it enters the battlefield, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you lose life equal to that card's converted mana cost. Because who needs life to live anyway? Just remember, 1 life is still more than 0 life. That's all you need. But moving on, we have Victimize, which is a sorcery for 2 and a black. And it says choose 2 creature cards in your graveyard, sacrifice a creature, and then if you do return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. So this plays double duty because it gets cards out, but it also puts a card in. So it plays both fields. It's a good way to get 2 really good creatures for, say, a token or something that you want to die. It's definitely gonna do a lot of work here because it could be 2 creatures that we just sacrificed, and then we bring them back and sacrifice something else, which can put a total of 6 counters on the Baron. Whew, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Next, I have Malakir Rebirth, which is a modal dual-faced card from Zendikar Rising for a single black. It's an instant that says choose target creature, you lose 2 life. Until end of turn, that creature gains when this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. And on the flip side, it's a land. I absolutely love these cards, and I think everybody should run more of them. This is a good way to protect something, or say you're going to sacrifice something for value, you can sacrifice it and then bring it back and get both triggers. Ooh. There's a reason black is my favorite color. Alright. Next, I have a card that I only recently learned about. It's from 7th edition, and it's called Strands of Night. And it's an enchantment that costs 2 black. And it says, for black, and you pay 2 life, and you sacrifice a swamp, return target creature card from your graveyard to play. Yes, that is a steep cost. I do not care. I'm going to put so many creatures directly onto the battlefield with this and probably lose to a board wipe, but I don't care. I'm still gonna do it. Okay. Moving on to our next category, we have those that witness the deed. Now, this is payoffs. In addition to the Baron, who triggers on things dying, we also have some other aristocrat cards, such as Blood Artist, which is a vampire that costs 1 and a black, is a 0/1, and says whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. Now, this doesn't care if it's our creature that dies, it counts all creatures, which makes it better than Zulaport Cutthroat, but we're also running Zulaport Cutthroat because more ways to trigger, the better. And though it is not the namesake where the aristocrat term comes from, it is still one of the most played and most well-known of the aristocrat cards. And this deck definitely tries to take advantage of those effects. Next, I have another, I like to call it an aristocrat, and that is Sir Conrad the Grim. He is 3 black for a 5/4 legendary creature human knight. But he says, and yes, this is a little long-winded and worded odd, but whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then he also says for 1 and a black, each player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. So it can really fuel itself to put stuff in our graveyard and in our opponent's graveyards. All good things. And moving right along in other payoffs, we come to the Piteous Plunderer. For 3 and a black, it is a 1/4 human pirate that says whenever another creature you control dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So it's a form of ramp, and it rewards us for our creatures dying. It doesn't care if it's a token or if it's a non-token. None of that. It's just going to give us mana whenever we sacrifice a creature. And I mean, he's a pirate. Why wouldn't you want to run him? Because let's face it, it's a shame to let good gold go to the grave. But up next I have the Pawn of Ulmog, which is 1 black for a 2/2 vampire shaman. He says whenever Pawn of Ulmog or another non-token creature you control dies, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token. It has sacrifice this creature, add colorless to your mana pool. This can turn non-token creatures into token creatures, and the token creatures themselves have a sack outlet directly on them. And the shenanigans are going to ensue whenever you get this out and a sacrifice outlet and just start looping creatures out of your graveyard. Oh, chills. And the last card in this section that I'm going to talk about is Harvester of Souls, which is 4 black for a 5/5 demon. He has Death Touch, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may draw a card. Now, interestingly, this does not specify a non-token creature that we control, and it is a May ability, so people can't try and use it to mill us out, but it is extra card draw that the deck is definitely glad to have access to, and he goes really well with the Baron. That's just all there is to it. And that brings us into our next section of the deck, finding what I need when I want it. And this breaks down into tutors. And it starts with arguably the second best tutor, in my opinion, Vampiric Tutor, which was just reprinted in Commander Legends. Still very expensive, but I happen to pull one in my box. Vampiric Tutor is a single black mana for an instant that says search your library for a card, then shuffle your library, put that card on top of it, and you lose 2 life. It's cheap, it's efficient, and it's something you do right before your draw step to put the card into your hand, essentially. It's still quite expensive. It's sitting around $50. But again, more people are going to be able to get their hands on it just from opening product with their Commander Legends, which is what I did. I'm very happy. You have no idea. But with that, we have its counterpart, which is, in my opinion, the best tutor in Magic. Demonic Tutor. For 1 and a black, you get a sorcery that says search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. It's not super flashy, it's not overly chaotic, it's just a really good card. It's also very expensive. It could really use another reprint. It's just not something I would recommend people go out and buy. I just happen to have one from, I don't know, 6 years ago. It's so good. Alright, next we have Diabolic Intent, which is 1 and a black for a sorcery. And as an additional cost to cast the spell, you sacrifice a creature. Then you search your library for a card, put the card into your hand, then shuffle your library. This is, I think, probably the best tutor for this deck, because not only is it a demonic tutor, but it also sacrifices a creature, which you want to be doing. It's honestly not that expensive since it got reprinted in Battle Bond. And it's just a nice, cheap, efficient tutor. The next one that I have is Wishclaw Talisman, which is 1 and a black for an artifact. And it enters the battlefield with 3 wish counters on it. Then, for 1 and tapping it, you remove a wish counter from the talisman, search your library for a card, put that into your hand, then shuffle your library. Then an opponent gains control of Wishclaw Talisman, and you can activate this only during your turn. Now you might be thinking, why would you do that if you have to give it to an opponent? But my answer to that is, just grab something that you're going to kill them with before they get a chance to use it. It's definitely the tutor that's going to be used the most to grab a finisher, where the other ones might be used to grab something less of a finisher. It's just, it's going to end games. And then we have the most expensive tutor in our deck at 5 black. It is a 6/6 demon. It is the Runescar Demon. And it has flying, and when Runescar Demon enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This essentially takes a demon and straps a demonic tutor directly onto it. The thing about this that's nice is with all of our reanimation, we could possibly get 3 to 5 cards off of this card reliably. And it's going to be nasty and disgusting, and it also beats in the air for 6. I very much enjoy this card. And I know that section was really short, but that's really all there is to say about it. They're tutors. They're meant to smooth out how a game goes. Next, we are moving into a section called The Usual Great Tracts of Land, which is my ramp package, which in black is pretty self-explanatory, but let's get into it. First up, we have Cryptghast, which is 3 and a black for a 2/2 spirit. It has extort, which means whenever you cast a spell, you can pay either a white or a black. If you do, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That is less relevant here. It's not really what I'm trying to do. But more importantly, whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you add black to your mana pool, so you're doubling all of your swamps. Now, we're running this and his slightly bigger cousin, Nirkana Revenant, at 4 black for a 4/4 Vampire Shade, who also says when you tap a swamp for mana, you can add a black to your mana pool, and also says for a black, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. These are fairly interchangeable. A 4-mana 2/2 or a 6-mana 4/4. They're going to fill the same role. They're going to be there to say, hey, my 3 mana is now 6 mana. Something along those lines. It's just acceleration. Next, we have Caged Sun, which is a 6-mana artifact that says, as Caged Sun enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures of the chosen color get +1/+1, and whenever a land's ability adds 1 or more mana of the chosen color to your mana pool, add 1 additional mana of that color to your mana pool. Now, we're running that, but we're also running Extraplanar Lens, which is a 3-mana artifact with imprint. And that means when Extraplanar Lens comes into play, you may remove target land you control from the game. And whenever a land with the same name as the imprinted card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. This one is a little more mean, because it's going to pair with all of our snow-covered swamps. So instead of giving every swamp the ability to tap for 2, it's just going to give my swamps the ability to tap for 2. Unless I run into somebody else running snow-covered basics. But, the chances of that happening aren't super high any given day. Either way, both of these artifacts do roughly the same thing. I mean, the other one gives me a boost, but I don't really know if that's a problem or worth it or what. So for now, I'm going to run both. And then after that, we have, well, arguably the best mono black ramp. And that is Yield, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and Cabal Coffers. Now, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth is a legendary land that says each land is a swamp in addition to its other types. And Cabal Coffers, which desperately needs a reprint, says for 2 and tap, you add black to your mana pool for each swamp you control. And since Urborg makes everything a swamp, Cabal Coffers, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we all know. But the other one I'm running is Deserted Temple and Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. Now, Nykthos is a legendary land that can either tap for 1 colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap it and choose a color, and you add to your mana pool any amount of mana equal to your devotion to that color. So, say we have Nykthos and 12 black pips on the board, we make 12 black mana. And Deserted Temple says you can tap it to add a colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it to untap a land. So you can double up on Nykthos or Cabal Coffers. It's very potent, and it's not really going to surprise anybody, because that's the best way to ramp in mono black. And it's the way that most black decks are going to eke out a win, because they're going to do a lot of what I'm about to talk about in my last section, which is games gotta end. Now, I say that with no intent to make this a super fast aggro deck. The deck is intended to win with Baron and not necessarily any of these. These are this game's been going for an hour and a half. Let's finish this game and start another one. And it starts with Gary, otherwise known as Grey Merchant of Asphodel. He is 3 black for a 2/4 zombie, and when Gary enters the battlefield, each opponent loses extra life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. Very swingy. It's the very classic black drain and gain. It's everything I always want to do. And after Gary, we have Massacre Worm, which is 3 black for a 6/5 worm. And he says when he enters the battlefield, creatures you control get -2/-2 till end of turn. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. And I see this coming down mid-game and just doming people for a bunch, putting a ton of counters on the Baron, and then one-shotting somebody with an attack. It's Nasty thoughts, and I love it. After him, we have Kokusho, the Evening Star. He is 4 black for a 5/5 Dragon Spirit. He has flying, and when Kokusho, the Evening Star, dies, each opponent loses 5 life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. Again, it's the drain and gain, it's dying, and then we reanimate, and then let it die again. It's everything we want to do. And then the last 2 are fairly interchangeable. The first one is Exsanguinate, which is X black, and it says each opponent loses X life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. And when you can pump, 50, 60, 70 mana into this, it's just going to end a game. Same with its counterpart, Torment of Hailfire, which is also X black. And you repeat the following process X times. Each player loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. You're going to get to a point where the X is ridiculously high, and there's no way they're going to survive, and even if they did, they're going to be low enough for the Baron to take out with an easy attack. And that's basically all I got. It's a fun deck. I've played a couple games so far. I will have the deck list up, and I will have a link to that in the doobly-doo. And yeah, I think with that, we're going to call this one to a close. And, if you enjoyed it, subscribe, hit the bell, give me a like, maybe hit me up on Twitter. And with that, I think we're done. That brings us to the end of the podcast. I would like to thank Nate and Erica Jacobs for designing my logo, and Cody Mulpey and Ian Foss for allowing me to use a sample of music from their band, The Crypt. The podcast can be found on YouTube by searching Commander's Forge. The podcast is Commander's Forge, that is CMDR_Forge on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at Bentzmister, that is BENTZMR. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, here's to fun games and sick plays.